Hey everyone, welcome to another video. So today I'm going to be talking about all my favorite books of 2020 so far. I kept putting this video off because there were just so many books I wanted to get to before filming this video because I knew those books were going to be favorites. But it just has gotten to the point where I have to film this because before I know it, it's going to be the end of the year. So I managed to narrow down 8 that really stand out to me that I want to talk about, but there are more. I'm trying to figure out a way at the moment so at the end of the year I can talk about my favorites, but we'll cross that bridge when it comes to it. All the books in this video are not in a particular order. We're gonna save me selecting my favorite book at the end of the year. Like, I'm not gonna put myself through that right now because I don't know. The first book I want to talk about is one that I really loved and I just feel like I haven't talked about it enough since I read it, and that is Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. I read this book for my time traveling vlog, which if you have not seen that vlog, I will leave it linked down below. So this book follows Dana, who is a Black American woman, and one day she is pulled out of her time, which is 1976, into the 1800s where slavery was in place. And because she is a Black woman and because the location that she's pulled back into is a plantation, she is then assumed to be a slave. Her traveling back into the past is connected to this boy called Rufus. She meets Rufus when he's a child and she saves him. He almost drowns. A really interesting choice that was made for this novel that I thought was so clever of Octavia E. Butler is how she decided to make Dana not just travel into the past once, she's constantly moving back and forth between the past and her present. The time traveling is something she has no control over. She is pulled back into the past whenever Rufus needs her. Just that was so clever in what it stands for and the meaning behind that, because Rufus is a white man. Well, he is a white boy at the beginning of the book and he is the son of a plantation owner. The whole control of white people over Black people and oppressing them and using them is just written into that time travel itself. What I also thought was a brilliant choice was how Dana was traveling back and forth between the past and the present. She meets Rufus when he's very young, at like 7 or so, and we see Rufus grow up. And at the beginning, Rufus is someone who is racist. He's a racist kid. It's something that he has clearly been taught because of the environment he lives in. And Dana thinks that she can change him, that she can open up his mind and teach him to be better. What's so scary about this was she saw this child who was ignorant as he grows older, especially with the amount of power he gets as he grows older. It was terrifying. Such an important book. The choices with the fantasy elements and the way Octavia Butler chose to do certain things, to represent certain things, was just so clever. The next book I want to talk about is The Girl Who Drank the Moon. I have not stopped gushing about this book since I finished it in April for Believathon. Again, I have a vlog where I read this book, so I'll leave that linked if you have not seen it. All you need to know about this book is it is a Studio Ghibli movie in book form. It's just the most magical, whimsical, pretty flowery writing story of a book that I've read this year. Yeah, it's actually probably the most beautifully written book I've read this year, so there you go. At the start of this book, we follow this village who sacrifice a baby once a year to the witch in the woods, and at the start they've just sacrificed the latest baby, but the witch takes in this child, accidentally feeds this child moonlight, and ends up raising this child. And she's also not evil or malicious like the villagers believe. And then this story, we follow this child who is named Luna grow up, and we also follow the villagers and how the sacrificing of the babies affects them and the roles that those in power play. I don't want to say anything else than that because it's a story you just read and indulge yourself in. It's very atmospheric. It's one of those books that will really take you away. Like I said, it's a Studio Ghibli movie in a book because it's got that magical element, but then it also has like that deeper underlying message and meaning, and it's also just beautifully told with the pretty writing. So I cannot recommend this book enough. The next book I want to talk about is a book that really took me by surprise, and that is Monday's Not Coming. This book, I still feel the emotional impact that this book left me with when I first finished it. This book follows Claudia, and Monday is her best friend, and Monday in this has gone missing. This story is told in 2 timelines. In the past timeline, Monday is around and we see the friendship between Claudia and Monday, what they mean to one another. We also see a little bit into their families and their family dynamics and also their school dynamics. And then in the present timeline, we have Monday missing and Claudia trying to solve the mystery of Monday and also navigating life without Monday in it, because these two are so close. Claudia doesn't really have any other friends at school. She is an only child, so she has to deal with being on her own, and it's really hard for her. I just don't want to say too much about this book because it is a mystery. I think it's a mystery thriller. I didn't feel like it was super thrillery, but that's just my personal take on it. I was just so captivated the entire time, and I just felt so much for Claudia and Monday in their relationship, and I understood it, what they meant to one another, and I really understood them individually as well. And it was a story with so much heart that it's unforgettable because of these two characters. I can't say a whole lot about this book because it is mysterious, but just know this book is amazing and I'm still blown away by it, and I think you should read it. The audiobook was fantastic again if you're into audiobooks. It's quite rare for me to fall absolutely head over heels in love with a YA contemporary book, but I did with this one, and that just says a lot. So if that doesn't encourage you to pick it up, I don't know what will. I then want to talk about This Beast, Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. This I feel like is the most obvious book to be on this list. If you don't know, I do adore Brandon Sanderson. I do think that he is fantastic when it comes to his world building and the politics and the magic. It's all so intricate and unique. His world building in particular is what I think makes him a very standout author. This is the second book in the Stormlight Archive series. So the first book is Way of Kings. I did prefer this one. I found Way of Kings to have a little bit of a jump to get into and to get used to the world, and then this one, of course, because it's the second book, you've already been introduced to the main setup of the world and the story, so you could just dive in and appreciate the characters. And what I really liked about this was we follow Shallon, who is my favorite character in the Stormlight series so far. In Way of Kings, we're introduced to her, and you know her family is in not ruin, but they're in hard times, and she has ventured away from home for the first time in her life and gone to seek out this lady known as Jasna, who is the sister to the king, who is a scholar of sorts, and Shallon has gone to her because she secretly wants to steal this magical object that Jasna is in the possession of. So that's where we follow Shallon in the first book, and we also follow other characters. We follow Kaladin, who is a soldier who was turned into a slave, and then we also follow some of the higher ranking army members. A little bit difficult to give you any more of a summary of the story of this book since it's so huge and I don't want to spoil you. I just love this world. There are these little like creatures called Spren, which for some reason I'm always picturing the little pixie fairy in Zelda. You know, the one that goes, hey listen. I always picture that. They're very interesting. I want to say more but I won't. I think what I love about this is the extravagance of the world. It's very, very large with a lot of history. There's a lot of characters. The magic is so complex but also kind of mysterious because I feel like you don't really come to understand fully in Way of Kings the magic, but in this one we got a lot more to it. We did kind of come to understand more the historical context of the magic, which was just awesome. I just really love a lot of the character dynamics in this as well. I love Shallon and Adolin and Kaladin, which was really awesome because in this book in particular you see all three of them meet up, whereas in book one they're all on their separate storylines. There's just so much to this book. It's definitely not going to be for everyone because it's slow. There's like a real emphasis on world building, so I feel like if you're not into world building you won't love this. I really love getting lost in the new world, and that's what I love about fantasy, and that's what I love about what Brandon Sanderson does. I then need to talk about The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. I've put this book off for like over 3 years and finally got to it this year. I regret not picking this up sooner because, man, is this book amazing. I love you. This book is the first book in the Broken Earth trilogy, and we are following two women and one young girl, and these three people have a power that is pretty mysterious, but it also makes them very closely tied to the earth, so much so that when they have a strong emotional reaction, most of the time it's a negative emotional reaction like anger or sadness, their emotion can trigger the earth and make the earth react in ways such as causing an earthquake. And because of that, people like them are feared, and that fear leads to a lot of them being oppressed. They have to hide who they are. Some of them are killed. We follow the girl who at the very beginning of this book, her mother has just discovered her abilities and is giving her away to these people who raise people like her, and they will teach her how to control her abilities, and they will also teach her how to be under control by them. And then we follow a mother who's just lost her son. Her son was murdered by her husband, his father, and she is one of these people, but she's kept her abilities a secret. So we follow these characters and the kind of lives they have to live because of their abilities. I loved this book and the way it was told. I was very intimidated because I knew going into this that it was told in second person. I really enjoyed the second person narration of this. I thought it was so well done. I can't tell you in particular what my favorite thing about this book was because it is a spoiler, but I just thought this book was so... I'm blown away by it. Genius. Like, that is what she is. And if you've read this, you know what I mean. Magic system isn't like thoroughly explained. It's kind of mysterious and you just gotta kind of take it and run with it. It's not a fixed magic system, and I still really loved it. Usually I prefer fixed magic systems, but I really liked how it was done here. I just think the craft of this book was incredible, and all the parallels between the people in here that are oppressed and the people in our real world who are oppressed and have to deal with negative biases was so well done, so well told in this. I also just adored how unpredictable this story was. My favorite thing in a book is for it to be unpredictable. I like to be taken on a ride that I don't know where the destination is, and that's exactly what this book is. If you've been putting this book off because you're intimidated, read it. Like, just read it. I was so intimidated. I thought the writing was going to be really complex and hard to get into. That wasn't the case at all, and I love it. And I wish I read this sooner, and I'm making sure that I prioritize the next two books because they cannot sit on my shelves for too much longer. Kingdom of Copper is another favorite of mine this year. This is the second book in the Godfather trilogy. I did read all three books this year, but this book was my favorite. In the first book, we follow this young girl who's 18-19, Nari, and she is a con artist of sorts, and at the beginning she accidentally summons back this ancient djinn, and her and this djinn then go on this journey across ancient Cairo to Godfather, which is the city that this djinn came from, and it's the city where all the other djinn live. This book is full of magic and court politics, and it's full of old conflicts between family houses and the lasting effects of war that happened years and years ago. I loved the second book in particular because there was a lot of politics in this book in particular. This entire second book is set in the court, and what is also really cool is the second book takes place 5 years after the first book. So as soon as you jump into the second book, there's so much to catch up on. You're just immediately thrown in, and I loved it so much. It was also so cool because it's 5 years later. These characters are now all in their 20s or their 30s, and it was so refreshing to follow these older characters. I also really liked in Kingdom of Copper that we got to know some of the other characters that we didn't really get to know much in the first book. City of Brass, the first book, really does focus on Nari and Dara. However, in this book, we got to know all the other side characters, and I absolutely love Mutahir. He is just a messy, chaotic prince, and I just adore him. I also really loved seeing Nari in this book because she went from someone who was a street rat to someone not a street rat, I won't say, but it's very interesting, her situation in this book. Nari has healing abilities. You do find that out at the very beginning of book one. That's not a spoiler. I loved seeing in the second book where her abilities were taking her and her character, and I just thought it was really cool to see that development. I also thought when it came to this book, you got to kind of understand the politics a lot more and the intentions behind certain people. I then want to talk about the book I just finished, and that is Jade Wall. I don't know which out of Jade Wall and Jade City is my favorite. We're gonna make that decision later, but this series I love it. Jade City follows 3 siblings from the Cole family. They are this notorious gang family in this urban Asian fantasy setting. It's about their conflict between the different clans. The conflict is over jade. Wearing jade is not only a sign of power in this world, but it's also actually gives these characters power and extra strength and healing abilities and just magical abilities of some sort. So this book is very political in terms of this fight over jade and in this fight over power. These books just have so many things I love. It has these really fascinating and lovable family relationships. At the beginning of the series, we have Shay, who is the youngest and she's the only girl. She's just returned home. She's been sort of in exile for a very long time because she had a romance with a foreigner. She was in an actual relationship. I don't want to make it sound like a scandal, even though it was a scandal. That was really frowned upon, and she also has always been someone who, even though she has her jade power and she's very really strong and good at it. Partaking in the politics of the clan and the way the clan works is something she's never been fully interested in taking part of, and she's just returned home and there's a lot of conflict between her and her brother Hilo. Hilo is someone who loves his family, loves what they do, and is a huge partaker of it, and really looks down upon Shay for not sharing that. And then we have Lan, who is the oldest brother, and he is the next pillar or head of the family, and their whole dynamic is everything. So many complicated relationships in this to do with beliefs and values and hierarchy and culture, and if you're a woman and where your place is because of that. These books are just so intricate in the relationships and the magic and the dynamics of the clan and the power and the hierarchy and the story itself. I just cannot stop thinking about these books, and I'm so bummed that I have to wait for a while for the last book in the trilogy, especially with how this book ended. Cruel. Again, this is another story I found completely unpredictable. I did not know what was going to happen. There were things that shocked me. I was gasping and like gripping this book so tight and like speed reading because I had to find out what was going to happen next. I just think Fonda Lee is incredible and I need to read everything she writes. If you would like to hear more of my thoughts on the first book, Jade City, I did do a vlog, a mafia reading vlog, where I read Jade City for the first time. You can just see me gush about that book. And the last book I want to talk about is The Godfather. Now this book is also in my mafia reading vlog, so you know, you really gotta go check that vlog out because I definitely found quite a few faves. But this book is a classic. In this we follow the Coloni family, and they are a mafia family in the 1940s in New York. I loved following this time period. I feel like I haven't read many books that are set in this time period that don't follow the aftermath of World War II. This again had really interesting family and gang relationship dynamics. We have Don Coloni, who is the head of the family, and he has 3 sons, but we also see how other players in the family also take part in the family business. There's a family lawyer, there's a family assassin. I loved this book because it was so dramatic. The main character in this does definitely end up being the youngest son, Michael Coloni, and he is someone who doesn't want to be part of the family business. He actually fought in World War II, and so he's seen as like this veteran soldier hero, but he is also dating an American girl, so there's, you know, conflict with that because he should be dating an Italian girl, and he just doesn't really want to do what his family does, but he is forced to due to unforeseen and unfortunate circumstances. And a lot of this book is his character development and his journey into becoming more involved in the family. What I loved about what this book would do was it would withhold information, so things were just happening and then something would happen out of nowhere that actually happened, you know, a few pages back, but you just weren't told. There were just so many gasping moments. I love this. I will say it's not a perfect book, and I definitely debated when I finished it if it was going to be like 4.5 rather than 5. There are times where it could be misogynistic. This is an older book, like I said, it's set in the 1940s and it was published in the 1960s, and there were definitely like things that I just didn't think need to be there that were just there for a man's ego. But at the end of the day, I just had so much fun with this. If you want to get into classics and you're intimidated by classics, because I know they are intimidating, I definitely find them to be so, and I thought this book was going to be really hard for me to get through, but that wasn't the case at all. I found the writing to be very accessible while also being beautiful and engaging, so I highly recommend this if you want to get into classics. And those are all the books that I've read this year that have really stood out. There are a couple more I could definitely mention, but I didn't want this video to be hours long. I think it's interesting. You can definitely see my taste when you look at these. Let me know what your favorite books of the year are so far, but I hope you enjoyed this, and thank you so much for watching, and I really hope that you're enjoying whatever you're currently reading, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!